Hey, Joey Starr here. Today we're going to go check out Overkill at the Wellmont Theater in Montclair, New Jersey. This is going to be my first time seeing a show at this venue. And in fact, my very first time hearing about this place was specifically for this show. In the venue's defense, they're all the way in New Jersey. I'm in upstate New York. And when Gregg told me about it, he was, and actually still is, in Norwalk, Connecticut. So the thing about this show is that I bought the tickets as a birthday gift to Gregg because I knew the show was going to occur within a week of his birthday. And what happened was, it was set for the 14th of March in 2020. Now, unless you've been in a coma for the last year and a half, you know that this was at the very beginning of the global pandemic. So what happened was, as it was getting close to time for the show, things became kind of questionable on whether or not we should go to the show, if the show was still going to happen. And in fact, probably less than a week before the show, I had raised a concern to Gregg saying, hey, listen, I don't know what's going to happen here. And the thing is, I needed an elective surgery for something, and I was concerned about getting sick. At that point in the pandemic, we went from an occasional case here or there in New York City to all of a sudden it was spreading like wildfire. This is not news to anybody watching this, I'm sure. What happened was a couple days before the show, they postponed it. Hiatus until further notice. So we ended up not going to the show. And then the following week, I ended up having that surgery. And the week after that, New Jersey went into lockdown. And then a couple days later, New York went into lockdown. So pretty much from then until a few months ago, we were kind of waiting for the announcement. When is Overkill going to play this show? So now, a mere 609 days later, we're finally able to see this show. At least according to the updated poster, is 609 days. And if I remember, I'll put that poster up probably in this corner over here. Sadly, while concerts have returned in the last few months, pandemic still very much affects them. For example, last month, I was supposed to film a segment, Gregg and I going to see Sebastian Bach over in Middletown at a new venue that opened up inside the Orange County Fair. Unfortunately, that show was canceled. Now, at first, I thought maybe Sebastian was canceling the tour, because I know earlier in the year he had gotten COVID, he was sick, and he had to postpone the tour. That was not the case. I wasn't given a straight answer from the venue, but if I had to guess based on other things going on around the same time and things that have occurred since then, what I think happened was that the ticket sales just weren't high enough for them to run the show. This is a sad reality that's going on in the pandemic, because the truth of the matter is, while vaccinations are out there and people are feeling a little safer, not safe per se, but safer than they were a year ago this time. So people aren't going to concerts as much for that reason. Another thing too is that if you've been checking the prices through Ticketmaster or any other way that you purchase tickets, the prices of shows have gone up, which is understandable because the entertainment industry has lost a lot of money during this pandemic, and they got to try to make some of that money back because people have mouths to feed, right? So higher ticket prices, safety is concerned, the cost of everything else like parking and food and merchandise, whatever, everything has gone up because we kind of had this whole economic issue going on everywhere, not just the entertainment industry, but the entertainment industry has taken a really hard hit from this pandemic. They're going to continue to take a hit because, unfortunately, the consumers, like you and I, we're having trouble with our money too, and as the prices of gas and everything goes up, everything's costing more. We won't even get into the issues with what's going on in transportation, how that's raising costs. One of my key things in all my channels is that I want no politics. No politics. It's like the Korn song says, don't give a f about politics. And another way this specific show is affected by the pandemic, besides that it was postponed for nearly 2 years. For the original show, it was supposed to be Overkill and a handful of bands, I believe 5 altogether, including Overkill. Now it's been reduced down to just 3 bands. And one of the bands that was originally on the bill, that's not on the bill now, that I was really looking forward to see was X-Order. And I had a feeling, even back when the show was being postponed, I was like, well, it's cool that they're not canceling the show outright. We'll eventually get to see Overkill, but is the bill going to be the same? I would have been very surprised if they were able to keep the same bill. But besides the fact that there's probably like schedule conflicts and all sorts of other stuff, there might be a financial reason behind it as well. Whatever money is being made for the show that's supposed to go towards the entertainment splits 3 ways, a lot larger than it would split 5 ways. And I'm sure it's not even split anyway, but the point is, it costs more to have 5 bands than it does to have 3 bands. So I understand that. I don't hold that against Overkill or the event planner or whoever had to make that decision. It sucks, but it's understandable. So I won't throw any shade towards you on that. So my first exposure to Overkill was back in the late 1980s. One of my friends had a cassette of the album called Under the Influence. At that particular time, I was not yet into thrash metal. The circle of friends I was in that was into heavy metal was pretty much mostly glam and mainstream hard rock, light metal, Motley Crue, Kiss, that sort of thing. In 1988, like, I wasn't even into Metallica yet. I didn't start getting into Metallica probably till about 1991. So thrash metal wasn't really on my palate yet. So in Overkill's defense, the timing wasn't there. But I remember hearing the cassette, and I was just like, okay, whatever. All I had was exposure to the name, heard the songs once, didn't remember a thing about them because I wasn't enjoying it. So then going into the early 1990s, I had become a big fan of the show Headbangers Ball on MTV. Remember back when MTV used to show music videos like most of the time? Yeah, back in those days, Headbangers Ball at that time that I'm thinking of used to run for 3 hours, and you would get such a plethora of different kinds of metal videos. Everything from like hard rock stuff all the way up to like death metal. That whole spectrum of metal was covered in those 3 hours. And Overkill had come out with an album, Horoscope. And I remember not only the debut, but subsequent weeks of airing the video for Horoscope. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh yeah, there's that band Overkill that I heard over at so-and-so's house. I kind of liked the song, Horoscope. I liked the song. I thought the video was kind of cool. Did not become an Overkill fan, but I had a little more respect for that. I was like, yeah, that video is pretty cool. That's cool. If the video came on, I wasn't going to fix myself a sandwich or anything. I'd actually watch and pay attention to the music. So then I basically forgot about Overkill for a long time, actually. So then back in 2009, I remember auditioning for a heavy metal cover band out in Orange County called Rusty Metal, and I went and auditioned for them. Cool guys. I thought we had a pretty good chemistry. It seemed like they were impressed by me, or at least impressed enough to say, hey, let's jam again. And they gave me more songs to learn. One of the songs that I had to learn to bring to the next rehearsal was Feel the Fire, which is off of Overkill's debut album. I gotta say that at this point, 2009, I'd already been a thrash metal fan for years. In fact, the project I was in just prior to auditioning for Rusty Metal, I was in this thrash band that's still around called Corroded Roots. That was all classic thrash from that era. So I was already in that mind frame of like, hey, yeah, thrash metal, baby. So I went and found Feel the Fire on YouTube. I'll tell you what, it's a pretty good tune. I like the tune a lot. I had fun learning it. And unfortunately, I never got a chance to even try it out with that band because they decided to split at that point. So could have been fun, but that's life in the music biz, right? So my general view of Overkill, I really don't know much about them outside of what I just told you. I don't dislike them. Perfectly honest, the reason why I bought these tickets is because Gregg's always been pretty cool into Overkill. He told me the show was coming. He kind of presented it as, hey, Overkill's playing over at the Wellmont Theater. You want to go check him out? And he already knew my feelings on Overkill. Basically that I'm not a fan per se, but I've heard their songs. They're not bad. I definitely don't hate them. The little bit that I know, it's pretty good. I've seen shows by bands that I absolutely hated and still had a good time. So it really wasn't much of a stretch for Gregg to suggest the show. And I looked at the information. I was like, oh, you know, that's close to Gregg's birthday. I said, you know what, Gregg? I'll buy the tickets. Happy birthday in advance. That's why we're going to the show. That's basically my overview on them. One more thing to add about that. One day I came across Overkill playing a cover of Kiss's Deuce, and I thought it was pretty cool. I was like, yeah, that's a pretty cool cover. And I looked up a little more information about it on the interwebs and found out that they had an entire album of covers. And I looked at the track listing and noticed that a lot of the songs were by bands that I'm also influenced by and love. And I thought, oh, you know what? They did such a great job playing Deuce. I probably should check out the other song. So then, again, YouTube's our friend, right? That's why we're all here. And I found a couple more cuts from the album. I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. So then I went and got the album. So I do have an Overkill album. It's called Cover Kill, which is a pretty clever title because it's basically Overkill with the letter C in front of it. So that it's Cover Kill. It is an album of covers. So pretty clever Cover Kill. It's a pretty good album, pretty solid album. I don't know if they're going to play any cuts off of that. I'm sure they're going to play Feel the Fire because besides that, it's a great song. It's very popular among their fans. I'm hoping to hear the song Horoscope, which I'd be surprised if they didn't play it because it did receive a lot of airplay on MTV, at least on Headbangers Ball. I mean, they were playing it weekly for a while. And another reason why this show is important to me is that even prior to the pandemic, I bought the tickets and it was the couple of weeks leading up to the show before we had any idea there was any kind of danger of the show being canceled. I was starting to look forward to it, not only because, hey, you know, I get to see a well-known thrash metal band, and of course I was looking forward to Exorder because that's another thrash metal band that I appreciated. It's like, this is the 2020s, and going to a show like this can just bring us back to that time. Like, everybody on the bill is either a classic thrash metal band or a modern thrash metal band, but in the same vein. the kind of openers that warm you up properly to see a band like Overkill and Exhorder had they still been on the bill. So the show is important to me because I'm thinking, hey, this is like a throwback. Once you get past teenagehood and you get into your 20s, you start to appreciate stuff that was around when you grew up that maybe you didn't like so much then. Unfortunately, in the case of Overkill, my first exposure to them was before I was ready to hear thrash metal. Chances are, if my first exposure to them had been about 5-6 years later, there's a pretty good chance I probably would have loved them. I know I can just go and research them and give them another chance, and I'll probably still do that. But for right now, I'm just looking forward to this show, hanging out with my best friend Gregg, and presenting this video to you. So let's go ahead and get ready for this show. For those who have not watched previous videos, this is Gregg.
Yeah, there.
My bestie, as you youngins like to say. We're going to talk a little bit about this show that we're going to go see. Gregg, what are we seeing tonight?
Wasn't it K-pop or some crazy band like that?
No, we saw K-pop last time.
Oh, right.
I mean, I know it feels like forever since you've seen them because they're so marvelous.
Oh, it's your new BFF, Justin Timberlake.
Yes, exactly. A little Timberlake action.
Yeah. In all seriousness, we are going to go see Overkill, a New Jersey thrash speed metal band from the early 80s that, if you would summarize what the big four was, of course, would be Megadeth, Slayer, Anthrax, and Metallica. If you had another set of big four bands, it probably would be Testament, Overkill, probably Pantera. You could throw Pantera in that mix. And who else would we throw in there? That would be speed and thrash.
I would probably say, I mean, I'm not a big fan of them, but I think they should be recognized as probably Exodus.
Yes, agree. And actually, Overkill grew up with all those bands from the Big Four. They've all met, friends, toured together. So this show should be really, really, really awesome because this is the first time I'm seeing them live. And this is a band that's been on my list I wanted to see live for a long time.
On his concert bucket list.
Yes. Funny story about this concert was we were originally supposed to go back in 2020.
Yeah.
We're finally making this show come true.
To add to his point, if the Big Four are actually the Big Eight, there's a pretty good chance Overkill would be considered part of that. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, the reason why I was kind of like, when you mentioned Pantera, it's not because Pantera isn't good enough to be included in that. They're more than good enough. It's just that they came a bit later. They're not part of the same in-crowd as far as when they started, although they were known to become good friends with that same clique of people. Although they technically debuted in the late 80s, they're really considered almost more of a 90s band because that's when Cowboys from Hell came out and that's when they really hit the map. What can you tell me about the Wellmont Theater?
Well, I know it was recently renovated. It's in Montclair, New Jersey, and I've had friends of mine who've gone to shows there and said it's a really nice venue to see shows. It looks like we might be having seats where the pit is, but we really won't know until we get there.
And that's why you're coming along, because you want to see what kind of adjustments are being made because of this global pandemic. 2 years ago, you'd be like, all right, you're going to a concert, so what? But this is actually, it's a whole new experience. It's like we're going to concerts for the first time, in some ways.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about Overkill as a band?
Oh God, they're awesome. Definitely underrated. I think Bobby Blitz is probably one of the most entertaining frontmen in the genre. He's definitely up there with James Hetfield, Dayton Stain, Joey Belladonna, any of those characters. He definitely could hold his own. And especially at his age right now, he's past almost 60-something, and a couple of years ago, he actually had a stroke.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And recovered. And he's still at it, and still kicking ass and taking names, and I feel like he hasn't lost a step. And this new album, Wings of War, great album. It's classic Overkill.
Greg and I were speaking prior to filming a little bit. I had mentioned to him how one of our mutual friends has a friend outside of our circle who's Bobby's cousin, and my telling him that kind of triggered something for him. Tell us about the guy that you work with and that little story that you shared with me before.
So, as what some of you may or may not know, I'm a union stagehand. So I have a union stagehand buddy of mine. He's in his car, and all of a sudden he's in Jersey. I think he's on either Route 4 or Route 3. And they're stopped at a traffic light, and up pulls this motorbike and looks to his right and says, I think that's Bobby Blitz. And he looks and he goes, hey, Bobby, what's going on? And Bobby lifts his visor, gives him a salute, puts his visor down, and takes off as soon as the light goes green. Can't make this up.
That's great.
My fellow stagehand buddy is good friends with a couple of the former members of Overkill.
It's always good to have those little interconnections, especially to these groups that we grew up listening to. Another bit of insight, see, this is why this guy gets invited to these videos, because he fills in a lot of blanks for me. As I mentioned before, I'm not as big an Overkill fan as Gregg is. I know a couple little things, but he's got a lot more insight because he's read up on them more. And particularly, I believe he learned within the last half hour about tonight's show with the guitar player.
Yeah, so just reading on Blabbermouth, they were telling us that due to certain circumstances, guitarist Dave Links isn't playing the show tonight, so they managed to get a fill-in guitar player by the name of Phil DeMille from Machine Head. And as I was mentioning to Joey, I said, if there was anybody to replace Dave last minute to fill in, I would definitely think of Phil DeMille. Incredible guitar player. Joe and I actually saw Machine Head play live
A couple of
times in the last couple of years, and they just bring it. I think Phil is an underrated guitar player, without a doubt, and he can definitely handle the Overkill material.
No doubt, he's definitely a monster guitar-wise. In our case, we're sorry that Dave won't be able to make it, but if we're not going to have Dave playing guitar, we're pretty happy about the fact that Phil is. Because he's pretty badass in his own right, as you just pointed out. So now, as we were discussing before, we're finally going to see this specific show. Forget that we're finally going to go see Overkill. That's already a big thing. But we're finally going to see this specific show after a 600-plus day postponement. How are you feeling about that? About this full circle that we're hitting now?
Wow. I felt like it almost wasn't going to ever come to be. It was almost like, is this show really going to happen? It seems like finally it is. We're definitely excited.
And of course I shared with you guys before what the show means to me and how excited I am and one of the reasons why. Something to add to his point about this whole string of events that led us to think, hey, is this show ever going to happen? Are we going to see it? Are they going to suddenly turn around and say, here, take your money, we can't have the show? A few days ago or longer, I had received the newsletter from Wellmont Theater announcing shows and stuff, and I had seen this little quick blurb about a low ticket warning. It was worded as a low ticket warning. And for 1 second, my heart raced because I already mentioned to you guys about what happened to the Sebastian Bach show and my theory about how low ticket sales probably played a huge part in canceling that show. So I saw a low ticket warning and I was like, holy crap, did they not sell enough? Or did people take the refund and now they don't have enough to fill the theater? I panicked for a minute, sent a message out to Wellmont. They assured me no, the low ticket warning was there just weren't people that they're almost out of tickets, as in the show is nearly sold out. So that low ticket warning is to get people to go ahead and buy the tickets. If you're going to see the show, you got to buy the tickets now because they're almost out. Thank goodness that's the case, because unfortunately, up where I live, not only are shows selling out, like I told you before, but some of the existing shows that are coming up, they're offering you a buy one, get one free deal because they're kind of hard up for ticket sales.
Yeah.
And that's pretty bad.
And just to add to Joey's point, I'm glad that the show is going to be almost sold out because Overkill is a New Jersey band. This is their home state, so they're going to be coming in full force with all guns blazing tonight, and the fans would not expect anything less.
Thinking about the opening bands, now, as I pointed out before to them, originally there was a significantly larger lineup for this show. It was supposed to be about 5 bands. Now it's been reduced down just to 3 bands. Besides Overkill, Demolition Hammer and Sworn Enemy are going to be the openers. Do you have any kind of insight into that, whether you know something or you just have an opinion about what's happening there?
Yeah, because of the pandemic and now with rescheduling the shows, bands have to reschedule their touring, not only because of COVID purposes, but because of shows at one time that were booked don't have those same dates, or the dates they can fit are available to them.
So you're obviously a very experienced concert goer. What kind of special rituals do you have to prepare for seeing a show? Any kind of things that you do the days leading up, the day of, on the way there?
Sometimes maybe I'll pick out a shirt I'm going to wear. I'm going to go obviously comfortable because it's going to be a long night. I usually make sure I have ear protection. Of course, making sure we have cell phones, money, ID, anything, especially for COVID, they're going to want us to see our vaccination card, things like that.
Do you have any final comments before we go to the show?
I'm just excited. I can't wait to see these guys.
Yeah, even if Justin Timberlake really doesn't show up, I guess we're still going to have a good time. I mean, preferably with Justin there, but hey, it is what it is. At least we get to see a great thrash metal band.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to see you probably at the venue next.
album, Derek! Never get enough violence, motherfucker! No big surprise here! No big surprise! This is where you was invented! We don't care what you say!
Alright, so now, just before coming here to the diner, we had just finished watching the Overkill show. I want to make some comments about the show, and then I'll pass that to Gregg afterward. So first, let's start with the venue, the Wellmont Theater in Montclair, New Jersey. Overall, a pretty nice venue, I think. Not huge at all. For those from back home, if you want to compare it to the size of the Chance Theater, they're pretty close to the same size. This place might have a larger balcony area, it seems like, than the Chance does, but the regular floor, you know what, this place is a little bit bigger, but not much bigger. It's like same classification of theater, but slightly larger.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty neat how when you enter the doors to go into the area where the concert is, that they have like the double bar thing there, in addition to the bar that's out in the lobby. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yep.
You have a general admission area as soon as you enter, like just where those little bars are. Then you have some special seating, which looked kind of weird, but I understand the concept. And then you have the bigger general admission area, which is basically like the pit area in front of the stage. I felt like maybe they were a little disorganized in a way. They started off pretty good. When it came to making sure people were compliant, they were checking to make sure that you're vaccinated or you've had a recent test showing you that you're negative. They were pretty good about that, like pretty strict even. There's a couple guys we spoke to who almost couldn't get in because most of the security there were not accepting people in who had rapid tests.
Right.
But a couple guys, they figured out how to get in by going to the right guy who was just accepted whatever test. But once you get inside into the lobby, and this might be part of the reason why they're so strict for letting you in, because once you're in, I guess it's harder for them to police what's going on, because we're honestly, the line for going to the merch table, which was totally disorganized,
I agree.
we were all on top of each other. And you know what I mean? There was no social. We were required to wear the mask inside. They were saying at all times except when you're actively eating or drinking. A lot of people, once you got into the concert area, they kind of took their own interpretation of when they should or shouldn't wear a mask. But at least in the lobby area, wearing a mask, period. There was no exception to that. Definitely no social distancing. It was just like being on a line for a merch table prior to the pandemic. Inside the actual theater part, we didn't go down into the pit, but down there, not only was it freaking crowded, and especially when Overkill went on, that pit area was full, completely full. And people were moshing, and I don't just mean like a little bit of slam dance. I'm talking about full on. I haven't seen like a mosh pit that fierce in at least 7 to 8 years.
Yeah.
If not longer. Seriously. Besides the amount of people, it was on. It's like something you would see in an Overkill video. It's one of their videos where they're playing live. It was that kind of pit going on, and people were like body surfing, women on men's shoulders, all sorts of stuff. Crazy. You'd never know there was a pandemic. Take that for what it's worth. For better or for worse, inside there, you wouldn't have known there was a pandemic. Now, for the actual show, 3 bands. For some reason, when we got there, I thought we had missed the first opener. We actually had it because I heard music from the side while we were out getting the merch, but I guess they had a longer set. So it was Sworn Enemy that was on first. I thought they were pretty decent, fun, entertaining. As usual, when you're going to see a show in a smaller theater like this, opening bands always get the shaft when it comes to sound. Like the sound not as clear. I don't know if you had a chance to notice, but I was able to notice later down in the setup where they had the sound area and the lights area. It seemed like the left side was the house sound guy and the right side was Overkill sound guy. That's the impression I got.
Probably.
Because during the first 2 bands, that side was empty. But then when they were set up for Overkill, it was all that one guy, giving signals back and forth to the guys who were testing out the instruments and stuff.
Right.
To make sure the sound was even. So I think that might have been part of that. I think the opening bands were using the house sound guy.
Most likely.
Yeah, and then Overkill had their own dude. Because Overkill's sound was way, way superior in quality to the other 2 bands. But Sworn Enemy played pretty good up until the next band, which was Demolition Hammer. I don't know if he and I see completely eye on that, but I thought they were, using the word great might be a little excessive, but they were really good. The sound really reminded me of more retro thrash metal. And maybe they are. Maybe they're older than I thought they were. Sworn Enemy had a little more of a modern sound. The thing about Sworn Enemy that I thought was kind of classic was the lead singer, to me, he was just like a Kmart version of like Fred Durst, but instead of rapping, he was like a screamer, like a rah, 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 rah. Demolition Hammer, they were like the real deal. Their sound reminded me a lot of very early days, like first 2 albums of Sepultura, kind of at that line between speed metal and thrash. Vocally, very much like a young Max Cavalera, except that it was the bass player that was a singer.
Right.
And the thing that I thought was pretty cool, I'm going to throw him now before I forget again, was that he had this Black Sabbath Volume 4 shirt on that I really appreciate. I thought that was really cool that he was wearing that. I thought they put on a heck of a show, especially for main openers. Overkill comes on. Now, you know, between the two of us, we've already discussed this. I'm just like kind of a casual fan, just kind of know, I like some of their stuff, don't really know him as well as he does. I thought they really kicked ass. Great show. Great sound, the energy was there, and I'm sure Gregg is going to mention this next thing, and it's okay that we both say it because it's so freaking true. Bobby Blitzer, man, freaking singer, the guy is pushing his mid freaking 60s, and he sounds better than like guys in their 30s in the same genre of music, honestly. Like the kind of singing, like there's some thrash metal bands where it's very straightforward, just mid-voice singing, so it's a little easier to carry on in later years. He has a kind of a higher end register to his voice, so a lot of high notes and stuff. He was making people look stupid. He just belting out those tunes, and great energy, great sense of humor. Interaction with the crowd was classic. I'm not going to get into all the lines because I want to give you a chance to be able to throw them out there too. I'm just going to say that my favorite thing that he had said 3 or 4 songs in, he turns out to the audience, he's like, hey, you guys all right? You guys doing okay? Everyone's like, yeah. He was like, not for long. So I thought that was freaking great. So for somebody who's not like, who's just kind of a casual fan, very impressive work by Overkill. Fun set, and as a true testament to how well they played. You know, as it is with concerts, even when you're seeing a band that you are familiar with more stuff, usually by like the end you're just kind of like, yeah, it's getting late, I'm a little tired, hopefully they're wrapping up. I didn't really get that feeling with Overkill when they were playing. Like when they got to the last song before going on to the encores, I was just like, oh, they're gonna start getting to the encores. So the fact that I was surprised, that really shows you how well they maintain my interest, even though I didn't know their material as intimately as he would.
Right.
Your turn.
Thanks. So, my impressions of the Wilmot Theater. Nice theater. I know supposedly they renovated it. It looks really great.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to expect because, like, as we spoke about, we thought there would be seats in the pit because that was an assumption of what the seating chart showed us on the website. But for general admission, it was no seats. SRO, you had some reserved seating behind the soundboard and to the left and the right, which was called the premier seats.
Yes, premier seats.
Yep. And then, which was more expensive, and then you had seats up in the balcony. Some of the cons about the Wilmot Theater, the sound was good. I liked the sound of the venue.
Good acoustics.
Good acoustics in it. You had to climb upstairs to go to the bathroom, which I think is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you got inside, it's cool that they had the lobby bar to the left, the merch on the right. But again, the guy who was directing the traffic in there, very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But when you went inside into where the theater is, like Joey described, it was really cool because you had the long bars, you could sit there, you can get a drink. I believe the food stuff was upstairs near the balcony.
I thought that's what they were saying.
Yeah, and trying to use the bathroom in the Wilmot Theater was just too insane. So as far as the bands go, Sworn Enemy was decent for an opening act. Demolition Hammer reminded me, like Joey said, not only reminded me of early Sepultura, but reminded me of Nuclear Assault with that heavy vocal sound. Early Nuclear Assault. What can I say about Overkill and Bobby Blitz that we already haven't mentioned? The band's been around for almost 40 years. For his age and performing as well as he has after surviving a stroke, he's at his top of his game. He hasn't lost anything. The showmanship was still there. The entertaining between the crowd. He's everything that you would want in a frontman. Originally, I said to Joey that I thought they were doing the same set list night after night with minor changes. No, the set list kind of changed tonight. On the encores, they played Elimination, and of course, they usually always end with You, which is from their debut EP. It was great to see that. It was great to see them do Rotten to the Core and Hello from the Gutter. And they played 1 or 2 songs from their new album, which is Wings of War, that got released. Jason Bittner, who is the drummer right now for Overkill, is also the drummer in Shadows Fall. Badass drummer. Really underrated. I never really gave him much credit when he was in Shadows Fall, because Shadows Fall really wasn't my type of band. But seeing him playing with Overkill now really has changed my mind a lot. And it was great to see Phil DeMel from Machine Head play with Overkill, and he did fantastic for a guy to come and step in for one night.
You never would have known he wasn't a member of the band the way he played.
His showmanship was great, just like when Joey and I saw him with Machine Head, and kicked ass, brought it. Dee Dee Verney doesn't age. He looks like what he looks like on the album covers from 1984.
That's true.
The whole band was great. The show was phenomenal. The light show was great. Jason's drum solo with Dee Dee playing bass was cool. Fit perfectly in the set. So as far as the show goes, I really can't complain.
Just something to add about the show, because I forgot to say it before, and this is something that I didn't necessarily expect from Overkill, was I thought they had a really high-level light show. Part of their show, they had this set up. It's no secret among metal fans that when you go to see a band and you see these really high towers of Marshalls, that it's just decoration for the most part. But they had those, of course, for the show, but they also had this like series of lights that were there, and some of them would change colors to like this bright green. You're gonna see this all in my video clips that I'm attaching to this. There were lights that would syncopate with when they wanted the audience to sing along and that sort of thing. But it was brilliant. It meshed so well with the drums, the way the drums were playing with the lights. It was just like, it was mesmerizing. It was like actually visually mesmerizing. At the same time, the music's like kicking you in the ass, audibly.
Yeah. One thing I will mention about being in theaters in general and seeing this type of band moshing and stuff, I'm not really much of a mosher. I'm more there to see the band and feel the energy of the music.
Many years ago, I used to participate in some moshing. It would depend how I felt about the vibe of the place or whatever. Honestly, even if I was 18, I don't know, that mosh pit was kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
It was huge. You'll see in the video clips, huge, ton of people. It didn't seem like they were really brutal with each other, though.
No.
It seemed like it was a pretty friendly mosh pit, but massive.
Yeah.
Really massive.
Very definitely 80s old school mosh pit, taking it back.
I kind of think what happened there was that everybody was so happy to go to like a real concert after the pandemic that there was like this kind of this big positive but high energy vibe going on in that pit. I think the moshing we saw and the body surfing, I think it was almost like a celebratory version of
Yes.
that. Everybody was like on this high of actually going to a concert that they were supposed to see back in March 2020. And now here we are, and we have the freedom because there was some security there, of course. There's no way they could have stayed on top of it and say, hey, you can't mosh. It was just too huge.
But yeah, I think the Wellmont is a great place to see a show regardless. Their equipment is definitely digital. You can hear it. It's got that quiet fidelity that digital is known for. I think I would definitely see shows again. Driving around there to find parking was a little weird.
That's one part I didn't appreciate. There really wasn't any direction as far as like, hey, if you're going to this venue, you can park over here. You kind of have to stumble upon it because, as he pointed out to me when we got in there, street parking in that area is free, but all the spots are taken. It's a very busy street anyway, regardless of whatever's going on with the venue, especially for Saturday night. But you drive around now, if you go around towards where the back of the venue is, there's an area with a parking garage. It was really the only place that within reasonable distance that you could park, and it's very pricey. It was $30. And yes, the $30 will cover you up to 8 hours, which that sounds generous, but not when you're going to a concert. You don't need 8 hours.
Right.
You need like 2-3 hours. So $30 was high, especially considering that the base price of these tickets when I bought them were $25 a pop. And yes, there were fees and other stuff that brought it up into the 40s, but still, it's like the cost of parking was almost as much as the actual ticket. So I didn't really appreciate that, although I did appreciate that there was availability in the garage. Well, there was another garage that's closer to the venue. That was full even before we even got to that part of Jersey anyway.
You know what? It's a 2,500 seat theater for a venue. It's very intimate.
Yeah.
One of the security guards outside was talking to us, and he said he's worked Madison Square Garden for a long time.
Yep.
He says, if you really like coming to see an intimate show, this is the type of place to see it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. You know, I'm thinking now, what it reminds me of, because I was thinking about the size, because I was thinking about the Chance, because, you know, we've been there like 1,000 times at least.
It's like our second home.
If you're familiar with the Hammerstein in New York City and the Chance Theater in Poughkeepsie, the size of this place is in between those two places. So larger than the Chance, but smaller than the Hammerstein.
Yeah, it looked to me also equivalent to the size of Irving Plaza in New York City, which I've been to. Possibly the Fillmore that's there in New York City. Actually, I would say it a lot reminds me of Starland Ballroom in Sayreville.
I feel like Starland is larger. Like you didn't have
Yeah.
that. You didn't have that second floor, but it was spread out more.
Right. But yeah, overall, me and Joey, we enjoyed the show. It was one of the great show. It was a really great birthday gift. Thank you again, buddy. I appreciate it.
You got it, man.
We had a blast,
Yeah.
as always, because that's what happens with us.
So by the time I get around to editing all this and actually putting a video out there for you to see, if Overkill just happens to still be on tour at that point, and you have a chance to see them, I recommend it. Whether you're Overlook. Jeez, the Overlook Hotel. Yeah. Oh yeah. Go there. Yeah. Whether you're an Overkill fan, or just a thrash metal fan, or even just a heavy metal fan of retro heavy metal, I think you'll enjoy yourself seeing the show. I think I only recognized 2-3 songs off the top of my head when I was there, and I still had a great time. Just to give you an idea.
So I guess that wraps it up for this, huh?
Yep, so anyway guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging out for us on this. As usual, like, subscribe, share, stalk. Alright, we'll catch you next time.